And now comes the best part, the juicy part, the part we've all been waiting for.
Victory screech!
Hey, no series is complete without a SpongeBob SquarePants reference here. So in this last video on the how-to part, it's not done for the whole series, but just on the how-to part, I'm going to integrate what we've done so far with a machine learning process. Now, some of you that have watched other videos on my channel know that I'm a big fan of the Data Robot platform. I use it at work, and I also have a bit of fun with it. That platform allows me to take data that I have in my data warehouse from a number of different sources, mash it all together, and create or serve up a prediction. And that's what we're going to do here. I alluded to that in the last video. So let me jump into Salesforce real quick and show you what I want to do. So in the column labeled probability here, I want to give the user a probability, a prediction that says whether or not we think this referral is likely to be somebody who is going to be admitted into one of our facilities, or at least choose us. And part of that, one big part of it, is where they live. How far are they from the facility in which they would come to? And so that's one predictive element. There are a number of other elements we could use to try and understand that person's preferences and whether they'll choose us or not. So that's what I want to do inside Salesforce. Now, where this data sits, and this is of course where it gets really fascinating with this whole reverse ETL process, is behind the scenes I've got a data warehouse here where I have that dimension table, the referrals table, but I've also got a fact table in here. And that fact table contains the probability that I got back from my machine learning platform, from Data Robot, and it's sitting in there, and it has the referral ID attached to it. So now what I'm going to do is create a custom view and join the referral ID, the dimension, to the fact table. Okay, and that's basically what's being done here. Now there's a bit of code in here, some SQL code. I don't want to freak you out. I'm using a tool called dbeaver, and I highly recommend it. It's a free tool for folks that are using things like Redshift, away from Microsoft SQL Server that comes with SQL Server Management Studio. This is somewhat similar. And so I wrote a very simple SQL view. This is not very difficult to do, and in most tools that have a GUI interface, you could probably do it without writing any SQL code. And all I'm doing is doing the join that I said I was going to do, which is to take the referral ID from the dimension table and connect it to the one in the fact table. And that's really all it's doing. And it's going to spit out for me the referral information plus at the end the probability percentage here, just a number between 0 and 100%. Okay, so I want that probability to show up inside Salesforce. And that's really the key to what we're doing here, right? What we started off saying, which is if somebody has to go out of Salesforce and run a report in Power BI, in Tableau, and whatever it is, then they're removed from the sales process in Salesforce. They have to go back and forth between two apps. That's not very efficient and context sensitive for the user. So I want to surface that back in Salesforce. That's the entire point of what we're doing here. So I've got this information here in the SQL database, in Redshift, and we're going to go back then to the Census platform, and we're going to do this sync so we can connect the data. So I've not done this sync previously. I'm going to do this on the fly here. I just have the dim referrals one that we've created. So I'm going to start over with a new sync. I'm going to add a brand new one, and we're going to go through the process very quickly because we've already done this before. So I'm choosing Redshift as my connection. The source is going to be a table/view. In this case, it is actually a view, and it's sitting in the public schema again. I recommend you use a Census schema. We talked about that in the last video. And the table or view I'm going to use this time is going to be Census referral probabilities, all right? And remember, if you don't see the view, if you've created it, just click the refresh button and it should appear there, given that you have the right permission set. All right, now where do I want to sync this data to? To Salesforce, right? And then the object that I want here is also the referral object. So we'll go down and we'll select the referral object, okay? And now I'm not going to create a new record this time. I'm going to only update if it exists. So that's all I want to do. I don't want it creating anything. in this process. I only want it to update existing records. And then we're going to match them based on the referral ID that I talked about before. And we'll go down and add the mapping in. So we need to choose where we want to map this. In this case, if I scroll down, I'll see a probability percentage listed there. And I happen to have that the mapping within my Redshift database is called probability. And so those two things are set up correctly. Now, I can go back and talk about this really interesting setting or option here where I could say only if it's empty, which we could say if I've not updated it before and it's blank or is null, then go ahead and set it. But here I'm just going to update the value. Maybe I have new information. Now I always recommend that we run a test, and so I can run a test right now and make sure that that's actually going to work before we do it. And out of a habit of good practice and believing in what I say, we'll go ahead and run the test now. Okay, the test has finished running and it shows me the probability that it loaded and the referral ID number. We're just going to go over to Salesforce and validate that that actually happened. So let's go ahead and hit the refresh button and see if we do have a probability entered there. It's 78%. Now, in this case, it's going to round the value up. I'm not going to get the probability with the decimal places there, but that worked correctly. It did update. So now let's go ahead and run the complete data set here, and we'll go ahead and check run a sync now, and this is going to do a full sync, and we'll create it at the same time. All right, it's finished doing the full sync, and as usual, I'm going to go and click on the see details to just make sure that 10 records from the source were updated in the destination, and that looks correct on the census side. So let's move over to Salesforce, refresh our screen. We see zeros here, but we refresh. Let's see if we have a probability entered for each entry here, and we do. That looks correct based on what I would see inside dbeaver if I looked at those records here, 77, 72, 51, and so on. When I go back and I look at that information, 77, there's a 51, it looks correct, and I can match it up on the ID just to verify that that's good. So I'm going to recap this a little bit because this is a little bit kind of mind-blowing, right, to think about how this can all be done. I have my Salesforce app, and then I have data sitting in my data warehouse. And I have data that's moving from Salesforce into my data warehouse to get those referrals and the accounts. But then I have some external third-party data that I've loaded into my data warehouse, and I'm matching that up to the referral so I can send that out to a machine learning platform like DataRobot, get a prediction back about whether or not that patient is going to choose one of our facilities, the main indicator being how far away they live from our facility. And then once I've got that probability, sticking it back into Salesforce so the folks working the referral have that information in line, in context with the work that they're doing. It's very kind of mind-blowing to me to think about it that way, that's how far we've gotten it advanced here into it. So that's going to conclude this sort of three-parter on the how-to piece, but I'm not done with this series yet. We're going to move on to talking about creating a schedule, and that speaks to the automation piece and looking at alerts and triggers in the follow-up videos in this series. See you on the next one.